All right, welcome everyone to Forward Focus. It is July 10th, so we'll be taking a look at what's going on in the overall market, as well as a number of additional securities and whatnot. So if you have anything you want me to take a look at, please post them in the question box. So Karan will be looking at D and Intel INTC. Potential Phoenix on the daily time frame ES. Yep, we can take a look, of course, at what is going on the indices. And KLA. Start with you guys. We have been focusing upon 2Ts and 2Bs in League of Traders this week. So I want to share with you guys one that we had happening here overnight on the Aussie dollar. So what you'll notice here is that on this 300 tick chart, you have your two-wave measured move down. And then in this portion, we also have an additional two waves. And in that portion, this hits a slightly higher low, and then it goes and has a measured move to a slightly lower low. So this is the zone right here that you would start to look for buy setups on the Aussie dollar for a 2B. Now, this hits pretty quickly. It doesn't flip around immediately. So what you want to watch for confirmation is see this little zone in here. Well, when this popped, it wasn't really a big pop yet. It was still on par with what we had seen over here. So sometimes what that will do is it can give you a little bit of a false trigger right there with the channel break of this level, and then it will go and flush one more time before it turns around. So that's why it's really important to keep your stop under that trend channel there. And then, like I said, in stop placement, go back and look at zones of where you've got kind of two highs and two lows pretty close together. You'll see them over and over again. So you'll see, distance of what's normal between testing highs and testing lows. This one we kind of got 3 in here. So that can give you that extra room that you'll need to keep on the books as a cushion so that you don't just get flushed out of that position. And you can wait and look for a lower risk entry. So here would be the first entry trigger right here. But what you guys can see is that since this pulls back to here compared to up here, if we transect that, that means the overall momentum and that tries to break is still like this. So that also increases the odds that that's going to flush first before it totally turns around. And then we have a great example of a double tap entry here. So we saw one of these on the ES this week. If you go back and you review our classes from the live sessions this week, we saw a good example of a double tap on an ES that was already forming a 2B. It went and did the same thing. And again, really nice two-wave move in here. So you can take the double tap entry, which is just an aggressive entry on the books as it comes into the previous low. This is where you often see me get filled like at the tick or a tick to the low. Or you can go and you can take the smaller entries like the channel break here or the confirmation over here. T2, T3. So T3 is right here. Here's the other little next congestion for the next target level, which you can also see is a two-wave measured move right there. Very, very steep. Wouldn't be something I would take as a 2T. And then it comes up into the congestion up in here. So you can see a really good progression of a 2B here. It also goes into a little bit of a megaphone-ish type of pattern, kind of nice little rounded lows down in here. So that is a good pattern here showing you on the Aussie dollar. This is, again, the 300 tick chart of a chibi. All right, so Nicole can break down that clip for you guys and grab it and bring it to your Thursday trading sessions. What, right, Nicole? That's a good little snippet there for you. So Thursdays, you guys, League of Traders, like you're doing a study session every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, and currently you're focusing on the 2B and 2T pattern, and that's going to teach you basically everything on the ins and outs of that pattern, so that hopefully you'll be trading it in your sleep. So let's go on here and to take a look at what is going on some of the other time frames and some of the other markets. So here another bone, we've got the euro dollar. This is a 60-minute time frame. And we saw the same type of trend development over here, and then the congestion that we are just seeing play out in the Nasdaq right now. So look at this trend over here. Really tight channel, breaks that channel, has an extra pop. Let me show you the Nasdaq. So here's the Nasdaq. This is a 20,000 tick chart. So we've got really tight channel, breaks the channel, extra pop, and then we're just seeing this kind of widen up. So when you have a really tight channel like this, that often leads to the widening up as things are coming into support and resistance, and that's just what we're seeing on both of these markets here. Let me go back. So at this point, it's kind of, we call this a zone of pain. There's not like a pure setup in here right now. It's kind of rounding off. You can see a little bit of head and shoulder type of action in here, inverse head and shoulder. It just doesn't really get too far. The range is still really in play, but what you'll notice here is that it's trying to do a sideways channel with this megaphone over here. It hasn't made it up far enough to offer confirmation for a breakout yet, though. So what we usually want to see with a megaphone is we need our spacing to be widening. It didn't really widen too much at the bottoms, especially since we have a double bottom here. So it's really pretty tight there. Ideally, it would have been a little bit slower into the support to get it going on the upside. But overall, treat this like a sideways congestion so far. So the odds are still favoring an upside breakout on this euro dollar here. Let me show you guys the daily chart. The daily chart has another great example of kind of how things widened up down here. It had this congestion channel all the way down. It wasn't quite as steep as what we were seeing on the Aussie dollar on the way up, but it had that congestion channel and then the widening up zone. So relatively speaking, this is a pretty big impulse move here. That can affect its ability to do a full-on, really strong breakout. So what we can see in some cases is that they can do 1, 2, 3s, but usually that would have something more like a check mark. And you can see so much of the trading is still holding down here. So it leaves a greater possibility that this tries to go and gain some strength, but it could struggle with that. It might pull back down, go into another range, do like a 2T in here on the daily time frame and the intraday charts, and then pull back into that range a little bit. Sometimes it'll still manage to break and just do like a slower kind of crawl to get higher, but it's just not as strong of a pattern when that happens. So be more cautious on this one right now because it doesn't have the great kneecap to really fuel another strong move easily. For weakness to come in, I would anticipate that it would have to pull back here really pretty quickly. Maybe do something that kind of chops around like that and then breaks lower. but I don't really see any indication that that's going to happen right now. So I'm not really too concerned about that at the moment. Here's our euro yen. As you can see on the daily time frame, pretty nice to be there going into May lows. So again, another good example for you guys that are studying the 2B. So you can see a good channel break. You can see all this congestion here in the middle. That's part of your 2 steps on the way back down. And this pulled back more than a third of this rally here. So what that means is that this can have a harder time getting going again. In order to get going again, we would need to see some sort of a check mark preferably, but it would still have a good struggle to break through those previous highs. So I would expect that even if it tries, it's probably going to be more of a choppier move, but I don't really see a good pattern right here. Let's go look at this intraday. So here you can see this with this rapid pull there, where it pulls in more than a third of this impulse move here, and it does it very quickly. That is indicative of odds for it to pull back even further. So that's what we ended up seeing in here. Really nice continuation moves. Momentum shifted down in here. We get a little bit of a momentum reversal into Phoenix. So inverse head and shoulders. But can't get going right here. In order to have a momentum to surge, it would have to have had the same comparable time development right here, pivoted here. It had one impulse wave up and then gone and confirmed by breaking past this measured move here to here. It couldn't do it. That means that if you were long this, be prepared for it to flush. Most of the time, that's what's going to happen. If this is a little bit of a stronger V, then that upside can be stronger too, because this over here is what creates more of the rounding off before it gets going to the upside. So you guys in the forum, you were asking about, I had asked you about a pattern last night, and then I went and I posted a couple of examples of it, and this is what we were looking at. The time development on this, I'm going to go and grab this here. So that's the time development of the pullback or the correction. You can see it takes a little bit to get going, but you're basically in that same zone there. And there's 2 ways of looking at this as a congestion period. You can use it when it breaks the channel right there, or you can use it from the absolute pivot lows. So that can give you a zone of where the setup should trigger. So here's the zone of the bigger one. And I'm going to copy this and paste it because it is a good example of when it can't go further. And you can see there's a little bit of a shift going on over here. So I'll post that in here for you guys as a good time development example. Let me show you another couple of examples of this. Actually, the euro, or not the euro, the Russell just did a perfect example of this as well. All right, here a second ago, let me show you the Russell. Let's see, it's 100 tick. I'm just going to pull it up on the micro. Where is it hiding on this list? Sometimes I just scroll right past it. Up there it is. Nicole, I hope you were in a great trade since you're showing up late. She's like, I'm late. That would be an acceptable excuse, right, guys? So here's a great example of this. See this, how this has these two pullbacks and corrections. They're about the same amount of time. And this correction over here is really messy. So it's easy to miss that unless you're paying attention to that time development aspect. So I'm going to copy this one too. What I recommend you guys do is keep different folders that talk about the different things that are happening in the market, different patterns and all of that kind of stuff, so that you can go back and study a whole bunch of the same thing all at once. So going back to this euro yen, not really something that I have a good grasp for, hey, this is what's going to happen next on this one, you guys, because there's just so much potential for this to just go into a longer range. So I wouldn't worry too much about this. I would just kind of sit on the sidelines on something like this one right now. You might find setups on a smaller time frame. This is a good 1, 2, 3 example for those that are wanting to learn more about that pattern. Here's a nice Mega Phoenix, and again, really rapid drop down there though, so it makes it harder to catch this type of trade. Kind of just like what we saw on the Russell there. What tells you the potential for a longer range? Good question. Let's go back to that. So if we look at this here, I'm going to erase the older fib retracements. You go and put this fib retracement on here. Notice that it pulled up to the 50% retracement level. That means that the previous low is a pretty good support zone. So this bounced here pretty decently off 23.6. So even if it goes into a range here, a measured move is going to put it back in that zone for the previous low. So you're still most probably going to get a reaction off of that level. So you can eyeball them or you can go and draw the actual fib retracements. So if it hits 50%, that low becomes harder to break if it retests it or when it retests it. So a better chance that, you know, even this comes back down, it could go and do a 2-wave into there and then go into a longer base. Could also do an inverse head and shoulders at this point and do a shallow phoenix, which would look like this. And then head back higher over here. So a shallow phoenix could still develop out of this as well. Not slow momentum. I mean, slow momentum. So Scott asked, is the slow momentum 2 on the move up to 50%? Not necessarily. So the slow momentum up just tends to mean that the drop can be faster on the way back down. So this overall channel on the upside where it has the 3 pushes, and again, we usually consider this 1 and this to be 2. It just means that it's going to fall and fail really quickly. So if I was long this, for example, and I was looking for it to gain momentum and it didn't, this would actually be a flip zone for me right here. So if I was in the zone and didn't have my, you know, child jumping in or whatnot, then that's where I would flip it. Speaking of child, he's supposed to be doing his math, and he seems to have disappeared. He's like, ooh, mommy's occupied. I'm gonna go play Minecraft. Doesn't sound like typical child behavior, does it, you guys? By the way, we had a good example of a shallow avalanche right here on the MNQ and the NQ. I just happen to have the MNQ as the predominant one that is showing the pattern. Let me see here. On a 200 tick. I restarted my stuff and for some reason it just didn't automatically load all my historical data here quick for intraday charts. But let's see if I can get that to come up here. I'll grab it on my other computer and just copy and paste. Since this is playing around too much. And this is a really good textbook example of a shallow avalanche also. Okay, and I go and I see there's a huge poop emoji in the forum. What is going on over there? What are you guys up to? So here's a shallow avalanche, you guys. See the two-way pullback here? Now it should have got going. See if we look at this pullback here, and then you got your second pullback here, but it can't go at the same time development. It doesn't manage to go with the inverse head and shoulders. So it fails here, and that triggers the short for the shallow avalanche. And it's just still going off of this. The Russell also had a really good measured move resistance at that level too. It's just right at first support. Jerry's the culprit. There we go. Now it pulls up for us. Here you can see it. It's actually part of a bigger 2T in here. Wasn't quite a perfect 2T. It kind of pulled up a little too high right there, and there's what you're really looking at. So then it goes into the shallow avalanche, and it is at T2. Here would be T3. So there is another example of the 2T for you. Let me grab and copy and paste that for you. Kind of throwing a lot of these into the room for you guys so that you can go back and study them in your session. So keep a folder titled 2B and 2T. And then there's your shallow avalanche. 2T. And then you got that beautiful 2B down there too this morning. So there are some good examples. There's even a little 2T in here. And a little 2B-ish formation right in here. Little babies. By the way, those of you that are kind of new, if you follow the LOT Alerts channel, what you'll get is just tons of my charting. So if you're trying to go back and study patterns and whatnot, that can allow you to do it without all of the chit chat, making it longer to pull through. And what I'm going to start doing too is as you guys are posting your trades, I'll grab the ones that also have good examples of what we're trading. So I'll post those in there too, so you can start to study those easier too. The 2T from the bottom, how would I enter that? I would just use a channel break here, or the smaller 2-wave measured move. Depends on what the support level is right here. If you look closely, there's a baby to be hybrid in here. Let me show you that quick on the actual chart. Here's your little to be hybrid right here. So it's a hybrid because it has a slightly lower low here versus here. We looked at a number of hybrids examples yesterday, but then it shifts. So this gives you your entry point. You could use this as a confirmation instead if you wanted to. It's kind of a little baby inverse head and shoulders there. All right, let's take a look at some of these other markets here for you guys. So we've got, let's see, I'm scrolling up my short-term memory. Disney. Oops, no, D, not Disney. We're watching too much Disney Channel in this house, I think. It's on my brain. Megaphone. So this has the potential to go into a 1, 2, 3. With the slower start here, you got basically, this would be a zone of where you would have your shallow avalanche happening. So you can see it pivots really quickly here and holds that. It doesn't go to higher highs. It just kind of congests like that. So if you look at it, this is your pullback. This is your 2-way base. This is your trigger on your shallow avalanche with the gap. That's a beautiful breakaway gap pattern there, you guys. So typically that will go into 1, 2, 3. I would expect the continuation to be slower than the first drop just because of how extreme that momentum is. But then I would aim for this zone over here. Have to look on intraday charts to see what's going on the intraday charts. So that is looking pretty decent for the check mark potential for that continuation. Remember how I mentioned I like to see that little check mark here to help drive it? Again, since this is super extreme, I don't expect that the continuation will be quite that extreme. So the main risk you're going to have to watch is a measured move right here. So that will be the first main support zone that would need to break. So it could even go into bigger base at that point to try to break, or even come up here and try to break. Those would be what I would be looking for. I would treat this really cautiously. Use advanced trade management and be a bit more aggressive on taking your gains just because those moves are so extreme. All right, let's see here. Intel. This is a beautiful checkmark example here, you guys. So see how this does the V, but then the base part is here and it actually has a smaller checkmark in it. That would be what you would see as like a perfect continuation. We don't always have that happen, obviously. There are some great examples in League of Traders this week, but that's what it would look like. You know, perfect for a continuation. And then see how that does the measured move there to there. That's the first resistance. And that's what we were just talking about on the downside. So this is kind of a zone of pain area. We are not quite sure how this is going to play out. So for this to break higher, you'd want to pivot. It's kind of looking like it's going into more congestion though. So that makes it easier to go like that and drop again. So it's right at a do or die point. It would really have to pick up momentum. It actually is bad that it pulled back so much already. As far as like the bullish side goes, it really makes it harder to do that. So the main way that we would expect that it could try to do that is if it pulls up here, slightly higher high, then goes into a second correction there, that could still drive it up, but gets harder. And again, that would be similar to what we were talking about earlier with the time development. So time development here and then here, and that could try to drive it up. That's the one way we would really see momentum being able to try to pick up again. I do think that it's kind of hanging down here so long, it increases the risk that this could do a head and shoulders and have another pull in here at least before it might try again. NKLA. Indices are holding that support zone, by the way. They're just kind of chopping around here. Daily, this is something that's going to have a really hard time doing a full recovery. Beautiful avalanche right there. Again, see how that pulled back more than a third there? That just makes this weakness come into play here more. And it's, I don't know, you guys, I could see it maybe doing a second wave back up here and then pulling in again, but I don't even think it has to. It could just kind of start creeping lower again and gain momentum on the downside. I would stay away from this one right now unless you're already in it. You can see the pullback is enough of this previous range that it can be harder to really get it going again, like a 1, 2, 3. There's not really a smaller pattern at play in here. We had a bit of an avalanche type of move with the gap, hit the main support zone, didn't quite hit that perfectly though. So a lot of times this will try to pull back into this pivot here before it would try to bounce again. That makes it easier for this to come and kind of go and do that and flush back into that zone before it tries to decide if it's going to bounce again. There's just too many possibilities for this, how this could play out right now, that you'd really have to watch it on like a 5-minute time frame for setups. So you're not going to have a very good return to risk is going to be my guess. There's a nice check mark there. That's a good playable type of pattern. Here's a nice little BB Phoenix there. Can see that again, good playable pattern. Here though, it pulls back more than 50% of this bounce. So that means these highs over here, harder to break them, harder to sustain any break if it does break them. So one wave up might do another wave up into that high, but really nothing developed enough for me to do anything with it quite yet. Two T up here on XLY. Three-minute time frame. bigger megaphone 0.6 zone. I would say it's at a level it could do a momentum reversal plus. Don't really see one forming in here. So here's the channel thing again. Big channel breaks it further like we saw in the other indices. Comes in here, but it's struggling up at the upper end of this megaphone. So it's treating this like a sideways correction, almost like you would see with a shallow avalanche. So I would be on the alert for traps in here. They could pull this back down, but just focus on the smaller time frames like we saw with the 2T and things like that. And if they're holding well, build into them. So since this is so tight here, we could get extra little pop there. So you got your little ballet toe that's really tight in there. So it might flush it down, pop it back up, and then go and just pull back further. That would be what I would expect as the kind of the most probable scenario here. Can see it on the ES too. Had like a really tight range at the high, pulled down, and it's trying to pop back up. Let's grab the ES chart. This needs to load here, but you can see this is like trying to form a 2T there going into 7 o'clock. It has the traits that you would look for. So if I saw this forming, I would watch for 2T. I don't know how that ended up playing out as I was not here the moment at that time. Let's scroll back. Oh yeah, well, it didn't quite make it up to a measured move, but it did reverse there. Come on, load. Just thinking about it, you guys. I'll just grab it over here. And of course, by the time I grab it, it will be up. Here's that really, really narrow channel. So a lot of times what can happen with this is it can flush, pop back up, and then go back down. So you can see a little bit of that kind of happening in here. You can see it to an extent, the same type of thing there. It's just kind of is repeating that over and over again here this morning. Dollar Swiss, let's see here. Get this pulled up. That Russell really took that reversal well. It's just totally flipping there. It's a nice shift in momentum up into the high here. You get like a 2T hybrid up there. 15-minute. Oh, it's kind of trying to turn around. Daily doesn't look so good. Weekly, kind of mess. Monthly, shallow avalanche. So what I would probably suspect is going to happen is that this is going to go further to the downside. So here was the do or die point. We were talking about this before on the dollar Swiss. And now it's breaking down. So overall, like longer term view on this is pretty weak. I would expect that this has a good chance for momentum to actually pick up on the downside on the monthly time frames. Could go into a 2B down here. That'd be a good possibility. I'm just gonna grab this for you guys. Stick it over here. Let's see. What else would you like me to take a look at? Anything else here? NIO. Did I pull that one up yet? I don't think so. Short-term memory problems. 2T. You got a 2T up there. This is a 2T that has a good chance of a megaphone forming. Let's see. Yeah, so a couple possibilities here. I mean, this could go into megaphone and try to bounce again. It could go into a check mark and try to go again. That would be ideal for a bullish move, is to see a check mark. That would help you out because this really flushed it. So that can bring in stronger selling. But we don't really have a pattern in here yet for that. It didn't follow through quickly on that. Kind of went out a little bit longer here. So you got a little bit more widening up, which means that your channel so far coming off of this is actually right like this. That's current momentum so far. So it would have to do something else to shift the momentum to bring it down to do a megaphone. But this is your 2T. It kind of does the flush. So we'll do PCG and PEP. Got a little bit of momentum reversal going down there. A little bit of 2B there. See the 2B, you guys? That's a great example of this on the 60-minute. So here's your first target zone right here. So you're looking around close to 9. Second target would be around 940-ish to 950. So main concern on here is how fast does it bounce here? To get to this target easily, we would want to see a pretty rapid bounce. Because if we look at this momentum here compared to over here, it's actually a little stronger perhaps. So that means that if this struggles to get going off of this 2B, you might get a bigger momentum reversal. And here's a bigger 2B formation too. So you're trying to get a smaller 2B and a bigger 2B. So watch how that momentum plays out as it's coming out of this 2B here. Let me grab this. You guys can get another example of a 2B. So there's your first one, except that it changes momentum here. Oops. And then it has your second smaller one in here. And again, it changes momentum in that last portion. Ah, here's kind of the larger placement. Notice this pulled up a good more 50%, so it makes it easier for the previous low zone in here to hold. So I would expect, more of a momentum reversal on that PB there. This would be something it would more likely have a slower pull higher and then flush again. So I'd expect a channel like this and then a flush to the downside on PEP. And last one, you guys, we'll take a look at Apple here. Apple has the zoomies. So here's what we're looking at. And that is a measured move zone. It's trying to get to 400, you guys. Here's the smaller measured move. It's a little shy of 400. So this is so strong, it's one of those that can flush and then go and tap it. Can it pull back to 370? Well, yeah, that's what would bring it to 370. And then then it would have the potential to do a double tap up there, or even like a 2T. Before it hits 100, yeah, I mean it could basically tease 400 and just not quite hit it, and then go and do that. We see that a lot with things that are retracing to like 76.4% retracements too. So like if this is, for example, a drop, and this is our 76.4% retracement, a lot of times we see things tease. They fall just a sliver short. And then they might go up just a little bit more and put in a bigger correction. And that is what I suspect is going to happen on Apple as well. That sort of tease there. And that will panic people. As it breaks the channel, people will start to bail. That will drive it down to your 360 or 370 zone. And then it can have that move up into 400 or 410 even. All right, you guys, thank you for joining me here today. I'm a little quieter today's session. I'm a little bit sleepy. So, gonna be a lazy Friday for me, you guys. You are very welcome. So I will see you all back here next week, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.